I kind of also miss the smell of Gilroy back in the days when you had the tomato cannery going. It smelled like tomato soup, and you had Gilroy foods and Gentry's garlic. It used to smell like Italian cooking or Mexican cooking. You get hungry going through Gilroy.
My name is Mineko Sakai, and I was born in April 27, 1924, and on Fraser Lake Road.
Don Christopher. I was born in San Jose, California in 1934, August 4th.
I'm Angelo Benassi, and I was born here in Gilroy. I was born 1937, June 28th.
My name is Bill Spendlove, Los Angeles, California.
My Casares, I was born May 22nd, 1949. I was born in Tulare, California.
My father came to America when he was 14 years old. His father was already here, so he came to Milpitas area and went to school there during the school year, and then during the summer he worked out in the fields. And that's how he met Mr. Kimberlin. Mr. and Mrs. Kimberlin brought him from Milpitas to Gilroy, and that's how he got settled. They sort of adopted him. They were in the seed business. At 16, my father learned how to raise carrots and onions and all that for seed. So he delivered sacks of seeds all over California to the farmers. By the time he was 21, I think, he made his fortune. He went back to Japan to get married, and he married my mother. Their marriage was arranged by the two parents of the fathers. I think she was so young that in those days she was kind of embarrassed. Huh? But I think she was 16, 17 when she was married. My brother was born in 1923, and then I was born in a year later. Yeah. Well, my father, in the late 20s, was able to purchase a lot of land, almost 800 acres, over 300 acres here behind the outlet, and then almost 400 acres at the Soap Lake Ranch, we call it. He was in his 30s when he acquired the land. We were the ones that were evacuated. My father was taken away by the FBI. My mother made him change into a suit because he had his work clothes on, and the police from Gilroy, he was a good old friend of Dad, and he says, "I'm sorry, Dad, Jimmy, I'm sorry." He kept saying he had to go follow him into the bathroom to change his clothes. The police did, because the FBI stayed out. My father was taken away to Bismarck, North Dakota. So they decided, instead of going to camp, we would go to, my brother and our trustee or trustor went to Colorado and purchased a home in Grand Junction, Colorado. And that's how I met Lawson. His family did not go to camp either. We were more fortunate, we could afford to buy a home, I guess the Colorado governor had a good heart and accepted the Japanese. So a lot of them moved into Colorado. My father was interned in Bismarck, and he was released about a year later, and he came to Grand Junction, and he started farming in Grand Junction. So when he was allowed to come back to California, he was one of the first ones home. He was came home to to Gilroy, intending to sell the land and buy land in Colorado. But he ran into a lot of his old friends, and who says, "Hi, Jim, I'm glad to see you back." So he says, "They're not all mean, so I think I'll stay."
I was born in San Jose, California. It was just my brother and I, and he's 2 years older than me. My grandfather was next door to my parents. They were both born in California, and their parents came from Denmark. They met at the Danish Lodge in San Jose, as I recall, and eventually Mom wanted to get married right away, and Dad was not in a hurry. So he held out for a couple of years. I don't know why. But anyway, they got married, and then my brother was born, and 2 years later I was born. And my mother was then 40, and so was my father. They had no problem raising two boys and being elderly. They lived at the ranch where I was born there, in San Jose, right next to where the new IBM plant was then. We grew prunes, approximately 200 acres of prunes. They harvested the prunes and they dehydrated the prunes, and then they set them aside, and then they put them in sacks or somewhere where they sold them to the canneries. I guess started farming about the age of 22. From the age of 9, people would ask me what I want to do when I got older. I always said, I want to be a farmer. There was never any question about what I was going to do. I didn't know what I was going to grow, but I knew I wanted to farm. And it was in 1956, I think it was. It was fun for me. I couldn't wait to go to work all the time. We were living in San Jose, so I drove to Gilroy every day. My dad put the deposit on the land. It actually was right where we are today, on the road to Hollister, Highway 25. I never moved from it. I farmed all around it. I farmed most of the land in the Gilroy area. To start with, I didn't pack garlic. All I was interested in was the farming part, for the first few years, because I was getting into something that I wasn't good at. We grew prunes, we didn't grow vegetables. And the first year I was farming over there, I had garlic, and I didn't know really very much about it. I was always into, doing something different, and garlic intrigued me quite a little bit. In Gilroy, there must have been about 20-some growers growing anywhere from 5 to 30 acres. It was a crop that was kind of getting going. There was a place in there for me. And so we got started, and I enjoyed growing it because it grows during the winter and it's green and everything when everything is dry. All the other crops haven't been planted yet in the spring. Then I started packing it. I enjoyed packing it and hiring a crew, and I thought it was more fun to do something I didn't know much about.
My father came in 1922, and he worked in lumber mills in Fort Bragg and in Santa Rosa, and he was sponsored. And every time he'd go to San Jose or San Francisco, he'd go through Gilroy, and he decided that if he ever settled down, he would settle down in Gilroy. In 1935, he went back to Italy, and he met my mom. He wanted to marry her, but the question was, do you want to come to America? She says she thought about it a whole week and finally decided to come. So they came to Gilroy, and they started a restaurant on the corner of 7th and Monterey. The restaurant was called Old Luca Cafe, but apparently my dad didn't like that type of business. About a year and a half later, he bought the ranch. When my parents bought the property, it was way out in the country. It was on Hecker Pass. In time, it became First Street. Our original address was Route 1, Box 30, but today it was 1410 First Street. We never moved, but we wound up in town. We had a little house. It was 2 bedrooms with the big kitchen, but we did not have toilet facility in the house. We had a privy. Approximately 1945 or so, we built a toilet facility to the house. We lived a type of life that was more or less self-sufficient, where the people would grow all their own stuff, big gardens, and can. We had our own cow, our own goat, and chickens, and rabbits, and turkeys. And matter of fact, my mom even had her own cream separator. You would pour the milk into it, and it would separate the cream from the milk, and with the cream she would make butter and cheese. In those days, everybody, we were very close to the neighbors, and if we needed something, we'd go see them, or if they needed something, they would come and see us. And my father, during the winter time, because at that point in time, everybody was very poor. And so he would work for other people, and sometimes he would just work for them so they could do work for him when he needed. So the ranch consists of 25 acres. It was prunes and walnuts. In time, we got a dehydrator, and we had picked 330 tons of prunes, and they came out to be 90 tons dry. In those days, everybody was farming, and Gilroy was all agriculture. And at that time, Gilroy was only about 4,000 or 5,000 people, but I do remember going to San Jose, and it was only 55,000. I remember seeing that sign. And, well, look what happened.
My father was born in Los Angeles. And of course, I was born in Los Angeles. My mother was from Sheffield, England. And she and her family were coming to Los Angeles in the early 30s on visits, and she happened to meet my father. And that's how they fell in love and got married in Los Angeles. I was the person who played the music during breaks and lunchtime in high school. And then I went into Los Angeles City College because they had a radio station. And from LA City College, I went into the Navy and went into radio in the Navy. And then when I got out, I took my interest in business and broadcasting and went to Cal State Long Beach. And from Cal State Long Beach, I went to work for a radio station in Santa Ana. I was doing radio and television, and I was offered the opportunity to come to San Jose and take over the radio station up here, KLOK. And so we moved with 4 children up to Willow Glen. And at that time, I became the general manager of Clock 1170. When we were in Gilroy, we were the only radio station. The radio station was actually an FM station, and it was the sister station to an AM Mexican or Spanish station called Casa. And that operated out of Morgan Hill, 1974. We bought the radio station and changed the call letters in the format. We became an original oldies format, and we changed the call letters to KSND, which was short for K-Sound. We were just fortunate in the fact that we had a number of the merchants who would advertise, and the car dealers advertised on us. You know, this was back in the day of drive a little and save a lot. And the radio station was located between 4th and 5th. I was looking for the exact building this morning. It was upstairs. I can tell you that when we took it over, because we were working with the radio station, we were on the air as well. We were everybody did everything. My wife didn't want to be on the radio, but she wanted to help. So she, in essence, was the office manager. And I needed a woman's voice so I could sell women's news at 10 o'clock, Monday through Friday. And we actually got her to read the news. I would write it, and the news would only be about women in national news, state news, and then local news. And I would come in each morning. I would get the Dispatch. I would get the Sentinel from Santa Cruz, and I would get the paper from Monterey, and I would pull out all the news about women, including sports, and then I would write that news for that day, and she would record it. A kind of a cute story is we would actually cover the Christmas parade right down Monterey. And Randy would sit next to me as the floats would go by. And I said to Randy that particular time, Randy, feel free to talk about the floats or the bands. And of course, he was only 9 years old. And he listened to me for a minute. I said, what do you think about this one coming by? And he said, well, Bill. And that was his introduction to, I want to say, don't take it that far. On Saturdays, I would let him come to the radio station and sit in the studio and play the records. I wouldn't let him speak on the radio, but he could play record after record and follow the log. And then on the half hour, I would actually kick the door open where what we call the UPI machine was click, 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 and I used that as a sound effects as a lead into our news hour or news program. And then I would read the news, and with my foot, I would close the door, and as I was doing that, he would cue in the music, and off we'd go again. And he enjoyed it. And I think this really tied in with his growing love and pleasure of music. With radio, you try to sell the fact that you're more music than commercials, and then you try to break up the music with good news. We felt that good local news was the reason why people listened to our radio station.
Well, we started migrating down here back in the, I'd say mid-50s from Tulare. And we would come down here during the summer and just come down here for the harvest, which is basically prunes and garlic. We started, like I said, we would leave Tulare. Oh, that was a day trip. From back then, we had a little 48 Chevy pickup and get 6 kids and my parents on there. And we'd start off daybreak about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and in between stops, and the midway stop was in Los Banos. And we'd get here to Gilroy about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And sometimes we had housing already, and other times we had to just get here and look for a place to live. First time that I remember coming here to Gilroy, we got here, we didn't have a place to stay, so we talked to one of the ranchers out here. He says, well, I've got this one little shack out here. So we went out there. We said, well, better than nothing. So we went out there. What it was, he had been keeping his chickens in there, and it hadn't been used for a while, but you could tell there were chickens in there. So we did a lot of scrubbing and everything, and since there was no other place, we had to stay there, and we stayed there for, I think, maybe about a month or two until we found another place. Most of them were just one-room shacks, no plumbing, no running water, no electricity. Also, we had a little kerosene stove. I had a pump, one of the old-fashioned pumps outside. I had to heat water to bathe. Like I said, some of them had outside restrooms and showers. A lot of them didn't. And there was just some of them, like I said, you could see, it looked like the boards on your fence, where you could see outside to the cracks between the boards. Most of the time we had from the previous year, before we left, the rancher would say, okay, you guys are coming back. So yeah, okay, well, we'll have a place. But other times we just get here and start looking for a place to live. During prune season, there was families out there. There was no such thing as babysitters. We'd go out to the fields with them. I think I was about 5 or 6 when I remember starting, had little gallon buckets, old paint buckets, and start picking prunes in them little things. And my garlic, same thing, you know, little kids, we would help out, gathering the baskets so you can top the garlic, or just sit around. Or once we were old enough to help, we helped. Of course, nobody liked to work as a kid, but it's part of, we got used to it as it being part of life. You always had to work. There was no other way. You know, I mean, we just worked. So we accepted it. Thinking back now, I'm glad I did.
Well, when we were kids, like 10 years old, we were supposed to go out in the prune orchard and pick prunes off the ground and put them in a box, and they would pay us so much a box. And normally a good prune picker would pick maybe 4 in an hour, and we would be lucky to pick 2. You know, we weren't too good at it, but we did the best we could, and we just, I guess we had too much fun, and there's nothing wrong with that either. We were young.
We always had chores, you know. There was always something to do on the farm. You know, we had the chickens to feed and different animals, and a lot of times we would go down the orchard and burn brush and do a lot of odd jobs. But our family forbid us to go out for football or baseball in school because we had things to do.
My first job was in killing gophers out in the orchard, because the gophers would go in and eat the roots of the trees when they were young, and the trees would die. Set about 8 traps, and I'd go out in the morning and I'd go out in the evening, and they were supposedly going to give me 25 cents a gopher, but I never turned in the gopher. So
My father had a lot of helpers. He had a lot of single men. There were Filipinos and Japanese that my mother cooked and fed. He built a barn into bunk beds, and they worked for my father. It was a dairy farm, so they had a cement floor building. I don't know. So my mother used to cook for the men in there. They had the table laid out on top of the cement, and my mother had 2 big woks that she cooked the food and everything for the workers. I was always taking care of the little ones, and my mother was busy doing all that.
Normally my mom would prepare lunch, and she would prepare normally burritos at that time. And right about before lunchtime, we'd go out. I would help getting twigs and little wood, and she would make a little fire. And she would warm up the burritos on the ambers out there. She'd cook what called guisados, which were a little combination of little minced beef, meat with vegetables. Just a combination. Got to make the best of what we had, you know. You'll never taste any burritos like that again.
Mostly Japanese food, yeah, rice, fish, a lot of chicken. The fishman came every week, and the bakery man came every week.
Mom was really a good cook, and she liked to fix breakfast, so we always had a big breakfast of eggs and bacon, and she always liked to fix the eggs and the bacon juice. So we weren't looking at trying to save any calories because we didn't know about them then, and it tasted really good.
After work, depending on where we lived, sometimes there were kids around. Other times, if we lived in a migrant camp, there were other kids around there, and we all played. If we were like picking prunes. We'd get the boxes and make little forts out of them, make cars out of them, just like Legos, you know.
We played a lot of kick the can and then run and hide, and when they catch you, then they got to go kick the can before it counts.
When we were little, jacks and hopscotch and all that.
We used to play catch, and believe it or not, we used to go down to the creek an awful lot.
We used to go out, play out in the creek out there and explore like we were pirates and all this stuff, yeah. And we would travel about a couple of miles up and down that creek, Yagas Creek.
At that point in time, the water pretty much ran all year round. You know, there was always water down there, and there was steelhead. And I remember my brother one time, they found this big water hole. There was fish in there. So they decided to camp out next to the water hole. In the morning, they got up. It was surrounded by people. They were still sleeping.
We would make a ball out of a rag, just tighten it with a bunch of string, and get a flat board and play baseball out there. Get an old, as kids, I made spears. I would put a nail at one end and throw at each other. So I got stabbed on the thigh here. One hit me. I said, dang it. Something to do.
In those days, we lived right in Fraser Lake Road. My mother used to walk us to school. It was only about 3 blocks. Well, it was different because my mother spoke only Japanese, and I went to school in Gilroy, San Isidro, and I tore up a book because I was so frustrated. I couldn't read it, you know. I think I liked school from the very beginning, once after I got through all that. I went to Elliott, Jordan, Severance, Brownell, and the high school. I graduated at Gilroy High School in 1942. I finished out in the last 3 months in Grand Junction High School, and Mr. Hadley from Gilroy sent my diploma from Gilroy to Grand Junction. That's where I graduated with the seniors of the Grand Junction High School. But I got my diploma from Gilroy High School.
My first school was Elliott School, and but I have to tell you something there. I flunked the first grade because the teacher didn't know Italian. But I went through 1st to 5th grade at Jordan School, and while I was in 5th grade, we watched Brownell being built. I was the first 6th grade class at Brownell. And I went there until the 8th grade. And then from there, I went to Gilroy High School, which was situated over on IOF Avenue.
When we started staying here permanently, I think it was about 61. So the first school, I think it was Elliott, Brownell, Jordan. We lived out in the country, went to Rucker. Then wound up going to high school here.
We went to Live Oak High School, and so we were quite a ways away. We would go out and hitchhike, and we got it so that the same person would pick us up almost every morning. Finally, I guess we got tired of it, or he got tired of it, and we told Dad we needed a car. I started driving when I was 14 because we were out in the farm area. I got a special license as a farmer, and so I could go to school and have a license, and that worked out very well.
The memory of downtown Gilroy was a little different. There was a couple gas stations. There was 3 stores, Betancourt's, Purity, and Safeway. The Oldsmobile garage was basically under the bowling alley. And the Strand Theater was there.
The first movies was Abbott and Costello and Elvis Presley, Blue Hawaii, and I think it was The Blob.
Yes, we used to go. Shirley Temples and Cowboys.
We had a neighbor down the street, and their last name was Bosco, and they lived across the street from the drive-in theater. We had a drive-in theater on First Street. Me and my 2 brothers, we'd go sit out in the strawberry fields and watch the drive-in theater, and we could hear it very well, and so that was our movies.
I thought it was nice. Like I said, we lived out in the country most of the time, came in. We used to go to the Strand Theater and used to go, had when they had the Midnight Blue Moon sale and Bonanza night or Bonanza weekend. And did a lot of shopping. Basically everything was downtown. And you used to run into people you knew all the time. It was nice. Yeah. All the stores were busy.
There was a Japanese grocery store, so we went there. And then the Grange Hall was built by the Japanese, like my father and a few others that put money up and built that Grange Hall. So that was our Japanese school.
And that was not only our main street, but it was the freeway. The freeway didn't come until after. Basically from 4th Street to 7th Street was the city of Gilroy, and then beyond that, the next block was China. We called it Chinatown, and that's what it was. There were a lot of Chinese people that were there.
Digger Dan's, my golly. It was the restaurant to go to for lunch. Late 70s, early 80s. If you wanted to meet somebody, you wanted to impress somebody, you would meet them at Digger Dan's. And it was so nice because Sam Bozo and Judy did such a wonderful job, and they were so active in the community. And quite frankly, in those days, downtown had lost a lot of its magic. And it was fading. And First Street was growing. And Digger Dan was the key. Of course, then you had Nob Hill, which was very, very important as well. It was just that area of town was the place to be at that time.
It wasn't my idea to start the Garlic Festival. It was a man named Rudy Malone, and he was the head of the Gavilan College. And he saw that in France, that a little town of 8,000 people had a garlic festival. He said, Don, if they can do it with 8,000 people, we have 30,000 in Gilroy. I said, oh, okay. So that's how it got started.
It was one of those self-promoting events when you're talking garlic, buy a little, save a lot, and the home of garlic. It was just something people liked to talk about, and it grew.
So the committee, and we did this all in about 5 or 6 months, and I was leasing a piece of property, and right next to it, we decided to have the Garlic Festival there. We got the cooks and everything, and they went to Monterey, and they got the shrimp and the prawns and all of the food, And we thought this is really going to be fun, you know. We ran out in 3 hours. I mean, people stopped off the road and just came in, parking in. They thought there would be no more than 5,000. We got to 15,000 people in 2 days.
It grew so quickly that it literally jammed Monterey Highway. People coming down from San Jose or coming up from Monterey or Highway 152 from Santa Cruz.
And I had a field that was close by, and it had garlic in it ahead of time, and we were just starting to harvest it, so we hurried and got it all harvested and dished it up and parked the cars there. The people really were thrilled to find a bulb here and a bulb there, and so that was a lucky thing.
I was fortunate to be asked to MC a number of the pageant, and that was a lot of fun.
Then we decided to go to see if the television companies would let us come to San Francisco and put on a simple deal of doing the cooking and everything we do a flame up and everything. So our cook was Val Felice, and he brings his unit that we can roll in, and he got it all set up, and we never thought about the flame going up high, but he put too much whatever it was in it, and when he lit it, it just went boom way up there. So it singed them a little bit up on top, but they didn't burn. The publicity we got from that is you can't even believe. I mean, the TV cameras just went wild, and they showed it for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks or more. And the word got out, and we had people from San Jose and from Los Angeles who wrote stories about garlic and so forth. So we really got a good send-off.
Well, I guess you might say that my time, it was basically all agriculture related. But in time, everything has changed.
Just miss them days. Even though we worked hard and we had all that energy still left at the end of the day, we'd find something to do, go play out there, be adventurous.
I worked in San Jose and Monterey in trying to sell advertising for our station. Gosh, that was, it was nice to come back to Gilroy because it was an easier, quieter lifestyle.
As everyone always gives young people advice, is get your education. Formal schooling might not be for you. Take vocational training.
Make sure you listen to your elders, older parents and teachers.
And you have to be able to accept change because it's a real changing world.
It's really important that they know how to work and how they can get along with so many different factions in the community.
Stay up with your people skills. You really need that right now. Keep yourself honest. Have some integrity. Losing that.
It was a nice town. I have often said it's a great place to grow kids.